Wait, so I don't understand. I truly don't. If your point is to tell first the Jews and then the world you're the Messiah, why wouldn't you want more and more people to talk about it?
I think it depends.
Why is that narcissistic?
Well, it isn't. Well, let's figure out first, to answer that question, let's figure out what narcissism is first. I mean, narcissism is the trumpeting of your own accomplishments. You pointed the other day when we were talking to the danger of religious hypocrisy. And we can put that in the context of using God's name in vain, right? Is making the claim that things that are for you are actually being done for the highest possible purpose, or praying in public, which is the display of your moral virtue so that good things can accrue to you, right? And I think there's ways, and you know this perfectly well, there's ways of doing the thing that you're doing and doing it properly and letting words spread and maybe even participating in that process without trumpeting any of that, right? Without waving it as a flag of virtue. And I think the issue here is that Christ is attempting to stand forth as an example of how to do good and also how to let the consequence of doing good be known without forcing that, without using power behind that. When God promises Abraham that good things will come to him if he follows the word of God, he tells Abraham if he follows adventure, he'll be a blessing to himself and that his name will become known. He offers that as a inevitable and proper consequence of treading the appropriate path. And to me, in these stories, what Christ is doing is letting that unfold in providentially rather than pushing it.
To me, the most telling thing, if I can interrupt for a minute.
Please do.
In the Gospel of Mark, you've got this famous messianic secret really clearly where, don't tell anybody, don't tell anybody. He does this, but don't talk about it. And it's only at the very end, he's dead on the cross, so he can no longer silence anyone. The centurion says, truly this man was the Son of God. And so he knows it would be misinterpreted, it would be misunderstood until he came to the cross. That was the point where his kingship, his messiahship, being the son of David, being the gatherer of the tribes, when all of that became clear. And so the beautiful irony is when he can no longer silence, that's when the man, and it's the Roman, importantly, says, truly this man's the Son of God. I think it's just the fact that he'll be misunderstood and he knows it until the cross.
And there's a risk also, I think, that when you're communicating something on a I'll use the term global, although that doesn't make sense in context, it can very readily, once it stops being relational, it can very easily become propagandistic, and then it becomes very cult-like, because if someone's hearing something that's heard from someone that's heard from somebody, the more steps that it gets removed from it, and you said, I was thinking organic, but providential in terms of the spread is probably...
But is Mark the only gospel in which that...
It's prominent there, and that's the first gospel, so it sort of sets the tone.
Is there something about Mark and his audience that might be relevant to why it's so prevalent in Mark?
I don't have to think
many of you are more better biblical scholars than I am. I mean...
It's just a very distinctive feature of the way Mark develops his account, so it's not absent in the other Gospels.
There's something relevant going on there for him, the author, and presumably the intended audience, right? That leads him to highlight that.
Classically, he's Peter's companion, amanuensis. And Peter, of course, famously doesn't get the messiahship right. Peter doesn't understand it properly.
Christ is a master at using short, mysterious stories. They change the listener who takes them seriously.
The person that you do not think could ever be virtuous, well, let me show you. This is the person who is fulfilling the law and the prophets.
I don't believe in that promise. I'll just be honest at this point.
Then it hit me. I saw it.
This Jew is very frightened of a post-Christian society.
The power of love.
I don't want to be in a Hallmark card, I tell you.
We've got our work cut out for us, gentlemen. I sure hope we're up to the task.
It seems odd for those of us making a recording that we hope millions will watch to oppose the idea of publicizing a good message.
Yeah.
Just for the record.
Well, I don't think he publicized the good message. He was publicizing his virtue. He wasn't virtue signaling. We could use a...
He wasn't publicizing. Yeah. He was publicizing his presumed messiah.
So he was healing people. He was helping
But he's not
them.
the strange Messiah.
Yes. So
Think about it
if you had a
personally,
cure for
Dennis.
cancer, would you like a lot of people to know about it, or just let word of mouth spread?
Well, when you've
If
engaged,
they misuse that somehow.
look, this is a definite conundrum in terms of the relationship between moral behavior and communication about it, right? But think about the situations in your own life. I mean, you're a public figure, and you're doing what you can to do good, and you're also doing what you can to let people know about it. But you know perfectly well that there's a distinction between people who do that properly and people who push in a narcissistic manner. A sort of push that gets them in great trouble eventually, and everyone else too, right? Or they're pursuing fame for its own sake, right? And so, well, how would you say how would you think that the optimal person would balance the relationship between doing good and communicating about doing good? Because I think that's what the text is attempting to lay out. It's like, well, why don't you err on the side of humility?
I actually have a guiding principle. One, I have many. I have a theory of 3 mirrors in life. The physical mirror, how you look. The mirror of your mind, which is writing. That's how you know what you're thinking. And if you have convoluted writing, you have convoluted thinking. And the mirror of your character is who you draw into your life. If you're a public figure and you draw decent people into your life, it's a good sign. If you draw awful people into your life, it's a bad sign. So I think that that's one criterion. The other is a little prayer I make before when I go give a speech. God, I just want to say what you want me to say.
That's exactly my prayer too. Lord, give me the words that you want me to say.
Yeah.
I always make that same prayer.
Right, that's an upward.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it is.
So you,
But that's also
you
what
put
Jesus
yourself in
does.
service of something beyond yourself.
That's my whole self-image.
I think the incomprehensibility, I mean, keep in mind, we're having a discussion now also after this story is, in a sense, complete, though it's never complete. Yeah. But the incomprehensibility, I mean, Peter can't figure it out. Thomas, I mean, again and again, even the people who are closest, who are exposed to it, can't comprehend it. So I do think that the nature of the spread has to be, it's not like someone could just have an announcement and anybody would understand it. There's a sort of closeness to it that everybody is struggling with, even the apostles.
So that's the necessity of having it unfold in its own time and not pushing.
And relationally.
And Jesus gives it as a teaching himself. He says, if you go in to the way, I think he talks about going into the synagogue, he says, sit in the back. He says, go to the back, and then they will call you. If they call you to the front, that is the real fruit, right? It's like what others say of you ultimately, or the way that others see your glory is much better than you trumpeting your own glory.
Well, he also says about fasting. When you fast, don't draw attention to yourself, because then you already has it. Where having your reward is your trumpeting of your virtue. I think that really God, and you might say what God is an inherently self-othering principle. That we see that with the pregnancies of the mothers of John the Baptist and of Jesus, that they are bearing these children who then go off into the world and ultimately die. It's not about them in a kind of immediate or instrumental way. And I think if you take credit for your virtue, or you seem to want to draw attention to that, you fundamentally instrumentalized for yourself what is fundamentally non-instrumentalizable reality.